Welcome to What's in a Game. Today on the pod, we start to finally decompress from the off season. We have a special guest, Matt Brooks, here today with Nuggets Media. We're going to discuss the Nuggets finally making some off-season moves in signing Dario Saric and Vlatko. And then we're going to discuss whether Matt and I were wrong about the ways that the CBA were going to impact players, or whether we were just early about our takes. Finally, we're going to talk about the Denver Nuggets with the most to gain next year. Welcome to What's in a Game. This is a podcast where an hour or even a day can make all the difference in the world. Well, less than 2 hours after we finished recording our last episode, in which we lamented the Nuggets' lack of doing anything to change the roster thus far this offseason, they announced, it was reported that they signed Dario Saric to a 2-year, $10.4 million deal. I think it was a couple of hours later that they announced they finally signed Vlatko to the minimum deal that I think everybody was kind of expecting. What was your reaction when you saw that news?
My reaction was shit, bad timing. No, but I was excited but curious. I know that it was linked. Booth was out scouting Vlatko and looking at Dario. I was just kind of sad because we were lamenting the lack of moves and speculating who was going to be. Not that Dario was super surprising. We're still kind of waiting on Westbrook, etc. But we're going to make it up to the fans who sat through that and let us speculate, even though the answer was out there, because we brought Matt Brooks on, who we're super excited about. So thank you so much, man, for coming on. This is exciting.
Thank you. First off, I just told you both, I love the show. It's been really cool you're both really insightful. The way you view the game and the guests you've had on have been great. It's helped me actually find people that, NBA Chicken, super smart, cap whiz, knows all this stuff. So it's been really cool. I'm super excited to be on.
We are going to get to more detail about the specific moves that the Nuggets made. But the other big news item that came on Saturday was that DeMar DeRozan got signed and traded to the Sacramento Kings. And, DeMar is someone who I thought was going to command a max contract from the Bulls this offseason. I wasn't sure where else he was going to get a max contract, given that Philadelphia ended up bagging Paul George. But, he's a really good player, mid-range maestro, really, even at his age. I was really surprised when I was hearing people talk about how he's almost 35. I'm like, whoa, DeMar's that old? He doesn't play like it, because he plays every game, and he plays 38 minutes a game or something over in Chicago. And in my opinion, the Sacramento Kings were lacking in some juice this last season. It might surprise people, but their offense was a lot more concerning to me than their defense this past year. I don't know how specifically DeMar fits into their system, but Matt, I'm wondering, does the DeMar move make you feel differently about the Sacramento Kings' chances as a playoff team?
No, and that's sounds super dismissive, but I'm kind of I look at the spacing, and that's where I'm all kind of I just don't know how that's going to work. And we've seen, I think I compared it to the Bulls team when they had Jimmy and D Wade and Rondo, where you're kind of you have these three guys and they are all really can do things with the ball in their hands. You're not really sure how the spacing looks. And it's just they were actually probably a little better than I thought they'd be, but I kind of look at this Kings team a little bit like that. But I also they're going to be a tough regular season team. That's just a team that's going to suck to play. It's going to be January. You're looking at the schedule, boy, man, All-Star break's coming up. And then you have to go to Sacramento after a road trip to play in the Warriors.
Didn't that literally just happen to the Nuggets?
Yeah, and now
back to back, blown out after a road trip to the Lakers, and
yeah, you're on a 6-day road trip, and now you have to deal with the best pump fake artists in the league, and De'Aaron Fox, who's just exhausting to
fastest guy
guard.
in the NBA.
Sabonis, who's just like playing every game, like, it's his last. He plays so hard. So they're going to be tough to play in the regular season. And I guess maybe that's their avenue for playoffs is like if they're like really solid in the regular season, they get a high enough seed, like that in itself just has so much value because you might play, hey, maybe you're playing a play-in team that is a little bit easier, or you're even just like we have home court advantage. Kings crowds have been really great. Maybe it feels like that. So, and I don't know, just adding another weapon, I guess, is good. But like long term, or like looking at it from a macro picture, I don't really think my calculus on them changes that much because I don't know if that was necessarily what they were missing, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like when I say my concern was with their offense, it was a lot less about like the juice that the offense had and more about the process, because you think of them as this really high-powered offensive team, but when you actually watch the games, you see them build up these leads and go on these like crazy like Golden State-esque runs, and then watch them like those leads just dwindle as they lose that transition game that makes it so difficult to slow them down and stop them. Maybe DeMar helps them by just giving them something that is a little bit more consistent to go to in the half court on nights when like Fox doesn't have it, or he'll like disappear for stretches of games sometimes. But I'm not as worried about like the overall spacing. Like I don't think that it's going to hurt them because I don't know how like respected Harrison Barnes's shooting was, even though like I mean both of them actually shoot pretty well from the corners. But I don't think that teams are like worried about Harrison Barnes as a threat. Plus, you had this last year, Keon Ellis was just fine in that starting lineup, and he's not known as a 3-point threat either, even though he ended up being okay on the year. And because of all the motion in their offense, the spacing principles don't necessitate having like snipers on the court at all times in order to, consistently get like decent looks on offense. So yeah, I'm just not sure. I'm more like curious about it than anything at this point.
Yeah, I'm not happy that the Nuggets, who have been playing really close games a lot in the regular season lately, now have to play the Kings with clutch DeMar DeRozan.
I mean, we lose to the Kings all the time anyway, so it's not.
Yeah, now will be even more heartbreaking, and Malone will like finally get over the hump of almost beating them in Sacramento, and then he's going to snatch his heart.
He's also a good playmaker, DeMar, which I like having another guy that you can that's just so valuable. I mean, I think like the Nuggets have seen that for sure. Like just having another guy that can come in there, handle, set up the offense a little bit. That's like the big appeal of Westbrook, right? Like that's the big thing is he's going to come in and just be like organize things. And so DeMar being able to do that, and on top of just being like such a like skillful scorer, I love watching DeMar DeRozan, honestly, like just the footwork and everything he does. He's really always been fun to watch for me. So I'll enjoy watching them. I think, yeah, as I said, like I think it takes their floor higher, but like ceiling wise, I'm not sure what, but also I'm not sure what the move would have been for them. Like I'm not sure what that guy would have been. So
yeah, that's what I was
thinking. We heard them in rumors for DeMar's now former teammate Zach LaVine and also Brandon Ingram. It felt like throughout the summer there was like the Kings were trying to do something. Yeah, is what it felt like, and I don't know that it was necessarily about finding a perfect fit, which not every team's going to be able to find that, but you can still try to take a step forward by like doing something, which is what they've chosen to do here. We'll see how it works out. But, Matt, since we have you here, I would love to get some background on how you got your gig with the Nuggets. So I started following that on Twitter during the Nuggets title run in 2023. Yeah. During the Lakers series in particular, you were one of the people that was constantly posting clips during the games. And it was really cool, like seeing somebody that like works with the team being in such like awe of the team. It was just like really cool as like a new member of the fandom to see like how invested it seemed like everybody, was with that team. And I know that you write articles about various concepts throughout the regular season. I know you just did a video on the big comeback that the Nuggets had at Golden State. And I think you told me that you'd only started working with the Nuggets like shortly before the title run. Is that right?
Yeah, I got there March. Like me and Reggie showed up.
Wow.
Together. Same flight. No.
And and you were covering the Nets before that?
Yeah, so I covered the Nets for, I guess, independently or like for a blog for 4 or 5 years, I think. So I did that for a long time. I just turned 30 this year. So I did that when I was like, I think I started when I was 25-ish, 25, 26. And yeah, it was fun. I mean, I covered them when they first had the D'Angelo Russell, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen team. In my first year, they signed KD, Kyrie. At that point, that's when I got credentialed. I was able to start going to the games. Well, until COVID hit, but yeah, went to a couple games. And then COVID hits, they get Harden and just continue to kind of cover throughout. And then, yeah, the Nuggets thing came about a little bit before I eventually came out here, came to fruition, came out in March. And initially I was like, yeah, I'll, cover the playoffs. Sounds good for you guys. I didn't know how long the playoffs are going to go. So I think, Grace, what you saw with like me taking in how good the team was, like that was so real because I'm going to these games. I'm like, holy shit, Nikola Jokic's pretty good, huh? Like, this guy is good. They are so fun to watch that year. It was some of the best basketball I've watched. I like so many people, I really fell in love with the game and like the schemes and how it's played with the Spurs back in like 2014. I was just obsessed with that team. Like I love that team so much. So to watch the Nuggets last year, but the year before, especially like that 2023 run and just the way they played, I was like, man, this is so cool to watch. And it really was like, I covered my first ever finals. Seeing the celebrations was crazy. It was just like, I didn't expect any of it because I'm coming from a team that was, had just traded away Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and then next thing you know, it's the finals. So it was a wild year. But it's been really fun to just settle in and continue to kind of find my footing and figure out what type of things I want to do out here.
So when you first started, it was just going to be for the playoffs, and then it was just kind of like, let's see from there? Or how does a contract in this kind of work? Like, how does that work? Do you know you're going to be with the team for a year at least, or,
some of it?
I don't know what it's like to have that kind of life. Yeah,
some of it's contract work. I'm not, but it's like it was still kind of like I don't know how to even get into all this, but like I got the job, and then it was kind of like, hey, can you come out and cover playoffs? And I was like, yeah, of course I'll cover play. I love going to playoff games. So
you're like, that's why.
Yeah, okay.
You're like, wait, I expected that this would be. It's like.
So I was living in an Airbnb at the time for all throughout the playoffs last year, which was also like kind of added to the whole story of it. And I'm living in this Airbnb, like somebody's basement, and covering playoff games for a team that went on to win it all. So I didn't know how long the run was going to go, right? Like when the playoffs ended, I flew back to New York and packed all my stuff and then moved out here full time.
Wow.
I'm out here with a suitcase of clothes and a computer, and I'm like, I don't know where it's gonna go. And sure enough, it goes all the way. Yeah, it was so fun though. I mean, and it's like, I traveled and got to see all these new places. So I'd never been to Phoenix. I'm from California, so I've seen LA a bunch, but it was just cool. It was such a different experience. I think for me, the nature of coming out here and seeing a city for the first time and living in somebody's basement, it actually kind of enhanced that whole experience because I was so thrown into the mix that it kind of, looking back, I can reflect on it and be like, wow, that was so crazy, man. So much stuff got thrown at me, but what a payout, right? Get to watch a team win a championship. What a crazy way for all that to end.
Yeah.
But
Especially
cool. Basically the championship was all about me,
yeah, you were the good luck. You brought it. You were
it's a really cool perspective.
The last thing we needed
Dreamers
to finally
coming down. It's all celebrating Matt Brooks. But it was really surreal. I don't know how to. That's the only way I can describe it, I'd say.
It's kind of almost unexpected because I'm sure you were getting very familiar with the Nuggets, like heading into this and working on the Nuggets and with them. To predict that they were going to go on right then and win the finals and win it all. I mean, I'm sure Nuggets fans were confident, but I was wondering like how much you expected that, and or were you just kind of like each series just taking it series to series, if you were like, man, I actually think this is wide open for them. They could go all the way.
So I'll put it like this: like I watched Bucks Nets, like that whole playoff series was there in person. Like
Man,
Durant had like I was like I think it was game game 5? Game 5 and 7, he was like ridiculous. I don't know if you guys like
took over. Yeah, that was
incredible.
crazy. Yeah.
And I left that game and I was like, wow, that is like I think that's the best I've seen anybody ever play basketball. Like that was so good. And so we play the Suns and I'm like, dude, I kind of know what Durant can do. Like I know that guy's a demon in the playoffs. And then I see what Jokic does and I go, oh, there's like I didn't know you could go another level higher than that. But that was, I think that for me too, like just the fact that the Nuggets played a team with a guy who, on the Suns that headlined the former team that I worked covered for years and years. It just was, the whole thing was really surreal, honestly.
Yeah.
Even Bruce being on the Nuggets.
That's right. I was going to ask
Jeff,
about that. Like, how long was Bruce there
before?
DJ, like it was just.
Yeah, I mean,
such a
DJ was
strange-
so like there that they got that coach fired for not starting him over Jarrett Allen.
Hired again though, good for him.
Yeah, good for Kenny.
But yeah, it was just like a really strange experience where it's like there are all these familiar faces. I'm surprised Dallas didn't make it too. Just saw like Kyrie would be there also, so I could just run into one more familiar face. But it was weird. It was really strange. It was like seeing all these familiar faces, seeing Bruce like walking down the halls of playoff games when they won. I saw Bruce in the locker room. I was like, damn, dude, crazy couple of years, man.
Yeah, right.
How we get here?
Who would have thought it's the Paul Rudd meme?
Right. It really was.
Yeah.
It really was. So it was pretty it was just I don't know, surreal. I don't have another word for it, but it was crazy.
So Matt, before you were working for this blog and covering the Nets, like how did you even get into sports media?
I wrote on my own website at first.
Okay. Is your like background in like writing and journalism or
psychology?
Okay.
Major.
Oh wow.
I took psychology. Yeah, my path is wild. Yeah. I took I did psychology all throughout school, and then graduated. I had a medical supplies sales career. By career, I mean like a year. I had a real estate career.
Oh wow!
Under a year.
Can see that.
It wasn't my forte.
It's all about enthusiasm and projecting.
I am enthusiastic. But so I had 10 lives before I even thought about doing sports. But I always I loved basketball. Like love basketball. Like if I'm on break, I remember my first job out of school. I would take lunch break, and instead of sitting with other people, this can make me sound so weird, like antisocial, but I would, instead of sitting with people, I would go to my car, I would eat my lunch, and I would just sit on House of Highlights and just watch Russell Westbrook points, 5 rebounds against the Hornets, and I'd be like, good lunch.
Only 5 rebounds?
Yeah, I'd watch everything. I would just watch every single highlight I could watch. I was so obsessed with basketball at that point. And then, I think it was, was living in San Diego at that point. And I started writing kind of a little bit on the side, just because there were people that I loved reading, and I was like, I want to give this a shot. And yeah, started writing a little bit on a blog. And then had the opportunity to live out with family in New York for a summer. And because I'd started writing stuff on the side on a blog, I was like, maybe I should try to, see if I could get something with this. I got a social media internship posting memes basically for a Knicks fan page at the time. And then from there, wrote a couple of things for their website and used those as samples, and then got my first blogging gig. And then it was kind of just building out from there, meeting people, getting credentialed. And then eventually I built enough of a portfolio and covered enough games and kind of just got to do enough things that I could send in a resume that actually is gonna be, not sent to the trash. So, that was kind of the journey, but it took a long time. It took 4 or 5 years to really get there. But I think part of that was just I literally started from scratch, like very, very absolute.
That is really cool.
So
I wouldn't have known that you didn't have like a writing, communications, like some kind of like media like background well before all of this, because you do all of it so well. Like I really love the Nuggets Knowledge series. We're going to talk about Summer League a little bit later, but I think one of the like first like non-Twitter things of yours that I really paid attention to was the like series you were doing on all of the rookies in Summer League last year. Actually, like speaking of that, when it comes to like your day-to-day stuff, like how often is it that you get like assigned a thing to do versus like pitching your own like stories or ideas for like a video or whatever?
I mean, I'll have things that like come in, but I think that's like a lot of them are just like, oh, well, there's like some of the stuff I'll take like ring night last year. Like all that stuff is like, this is coming in, we're having this event at this time. Like which is like, makes sense. Like I'm running the website, so I should like get all that stuff up. But I actually think like the beauty of, and why I love the gig that I'm in, is that I have a ton of freedom. And that was what I was told, kind of even interviewing, is like, you make of this, like it's your sandbox. Like you can take this as far as you want to. So, and I love that. Like I've never been somebody who's like had issues with coming up with ideas. I've always feel like I'm just always thinking about basketball. I think that's
I
part
know
of
what
it.
that feels like.
It's overwhelming sometimes. It's overwhelming. But it's I think that definitely plays into it. But it's amazing. Let's take last playoffs, like Nicola's game 5. I get to sit there and like
A
do a whole
masterpiece.
article and like write about his post ups and like write about, okay, he's reading the corner man and then he's finding AG in the dunker spot, and like that's what I get to do for a job. Like, and and I'm allowed to do that, which is super cool. So that I've always and will always appreciate, like with this gig, I have so much freedom to like really just share what I see, which sometimes I'm right about things, sometimes I'm not, but that's kind of the role I'm in, which is really cool. So
it's awesome that you ended up with the Nuggets. We're super happy to have you
Thank you.
here in this org as fans. Obviously, Grace and I love following you on Twitter. And if anyone listening to this has not followed Matt yet, you have to do it right now. But the Nuggets were kind of billed as this team that was one of the most fun teams to watch, kind of when Jokic was coming up, because he was kind of an unknown. Like some people were aware of it, some people weren't, because Denver, smaller market than the coasts. But it must be exciting just to like do what you do and have this sandbox for a team that's still argued as one of the most fun teams to watch.
Yeah, it is. I mean, so it's funny. Like I watched them. I watched them some. It would be like when I'd get back from a Nets game, and I'm like, all right, I need to kind of tone things down. Time to relax. Let's throw on like a Pacific or whatever late game, because I'm on East Coast time out there.
Yeah.
So I watched a lot of like Nuggets, Blazers, stuff like that. So I like watch them. If you look way back, I don't even know what website this would be on, but there are some archives of me writing about Gary Harris. So like I've always kind of like I've enjoyed watching Denver. It's just I covered a different team for so long, and that team got really good. The Nets were like one of the marquee teams for a couple years there. But I've watched Denver on and off for a long time. I've always loved watching them. Me and my dad have loved watching Jokic. There was a Christmas break where I came home and I was like, "You're gonna like this guy, Dad." Like I showed you. I don't remember who I showed him before, but I was like, "You're gonna like this guy. He's fun to watch." So it's funny. They've been a part of my life in some shape or form for a while.
Jokic is one of the most exciting players, but are there any new young players that you're most excited about watching at this summer league?
Yeah, I'm like Mr. Julian. I'm like the Julian Strawhair hype train this year, which catching on some steam. It seems like he's the name for the last couple of weeks of like guys on the existing roster, just on Twitter. Which take it that what you will, but I'm really excited to watch him. I think he has just a big opportunity. If you look at kind of how the bench is coming together. his shooting and his ability to relocate and cut, be a part of that offense, use his shooting gravity, is all going to be really important. So he's just like, he kind of brings that bench unit together to me. And as a result, I feel like I've been watching him a lot. It's funny you mentioned that. We have this week, we're dropping a Nuggets knowledge on Julian. So I went pretty in depth into just different sets that they run for him, which is a lot, by the way. They run a lot of sets. I actually talked to Malone last week, and he said they run the third most ATOs for him behind Nikola and Jamal. So pretty good company, right? So he's I think he's like a really big factor, and I'm excited to put that out if I'm allowed to shamelessly promo something out here.
Oh no, absolutely. No,
I want to see
plug
that
whatever.
too.
Go ahead. Cool.
I saw some of the mini camp practice media, and Julian was talking a little bit more about ball handling and playmaking than I was expecting in terms of what he's been focusing on in his game.
I was curious about that too, because he can do it. Like he's like and which is like makes him the big crux of this video. I don't want to give it away too much, but like he is such a perfect fit for Jokic ball. Like he really is. I mean, he's good off shooting off handoffs. He's really good at like relocating, turning, getting his shot up in like that. Like he's such a quick shooter that's able to turn and catch on different angles and get shots up. His range stretches out to like 28 feet, but he's also really good at pocket passing. Like he's got some of the other reads, I don't know if he's had the opportunity to show them yet, but in the limited instances that we've seen him run pick and roll, he's really good at those pick and roll, pocket passes, which is like the most important pass you can have. If you're a ball handler on the Nuggets, like if you can make the pocket pass to Jokic where he's in his shooting pocket and he's able to get a floater up, that is by far the most important pass you can have. And he's got it already. So, I'm definitely curious to see what that means. And like, I even want to know, like, all right, Julian Strother, ball handler, what does that mean? Like, is he taking the ball up, off a rebound, setting up the offense? Or is it more like somebody else is attacking, let's say it's Jalen Pickett or Trey Alexander, driving, coming up a screen and then kicking across court to Julian? Is he now making a second side read? Like, is it primary stuff or is it more like ancillary things? So, I think it'll be really fun. He's definitely like number one for me of like people I'm watching. But the team was fun. I mean, there's a lot of guys that like have big opportunities. Jalen's got a big opportunity just with where the point guard spot is right now. Obviously, Holmes has got a ton of opportunity there. So there's a lot to watch. But he's definitely way up top for me. I've just been thinking a lot about what the 100th percentile version of Julian Strother looks like on this roster.
Yeah, no. Will has been talking about Point Julian ever since I can remember, since I started following you. You were really...
Yeah, I was always like, he could, ever since he was drafted, I was like, maybe he could even play point guard at some point. Like, let's see. But obviously, I don't think that's going to happen right now. So if if it is like second read type stuff and he's nailing it, who knows? It could be something. If he's getting on that pocket pass consistently and it's hitting and, his gravity is working and his shots on, like, you never know. But right now, it's probably too much for him. I mean, these players the expectations are pretty high for them to come in and be contributors on a championship contending team. Super interesting. A lot of times players who are drafted, they're going to play more on these teams. The leash is going to be maybe longer. With the Nuggets, they're high draft picks. Do you think like they're under unique pressure because of this like plan that Booth is doing, or how do they look right now?
Yeah, I guess a little bit inherently, because like it is, I guess you just sort of look at it as like, all right, like there's only so many roster spots, right? So I don't know like if Julian is shooting, is it coming along? It does kind of it does become a little bit of like all right, what are we doing next? Are we playing bigger where it's like Holmes, Vlatko, Payton at the 2, So I do think in a way like it's built in that the young guys are going to be contributors. That's the whole basis of this plan. But I think just based on what they said, there is like patience with them. That's something that I think it was DeRozan who said that today or yesterday about how there is such a sense of understanding within the organization that, hey, there are going to be growing pains. There are going to be things like that. So I do think there's that side of things is being maintained.
I will say, I think it's a little bit easier for the front office to say that than the coaching staff to deal with it. But
that's the whole battle, though, right? Like,
you gotta get them to be patient with them. Yeah, and Malone, it's a mixed bag with him, with playing young guys and having short leases and pulling them after a mistake and not getting them back in the rotation games later. So now we technically have more depth with KCP going. Maybe you could argue that. So I don't know.
I will say
you can try to argue it, but
well, there might be more pieces to go
days.
to. It may not be like depth on paper, but more versatile with the pieces you can plug in. Maybe that's like the theory.
I think it depends on the position.
Yeah,
I think it depends on the position because let's get into the actual moves that the Nuggets made, because I think that the roster has fundamentally shifted in terms of which positions were prioritized. So, on our last episode, Will, I was pretty visibly very tense about the lack of clarity, certainty with where the Nuggets were going to go this offseason. Not necessarily what they were trying to do, because there's all this news in the air that they're pursuing this region and trying to get Russell Westbrook in a trade, but nothing had been actually done yet. Then right after our show, they did sign Dario Saric, which was a big deal because there, was news that maybe he was going to go to a EuroLeague club, or, he might have gone to another team. But do you, for you, because I don't actually know how tense you were, I just know it was less than me. For you, does the Dario signing change or improve the vibes about the Nuggets offseason at all?
I think it does. I mean, we needed depth in the front court. Now we have a lot of people in the front court, which is kind of interesting. That's a whole discussion in itself. I mean, as soon as we signed Dario, I thought, does that mean Vlatko's not coming back? And so that was kind of an interesting question and something that I was prepared to maybe be sad about. I think with me and why I was calm is a lot of the times in NBA, where there's smoke, there's fire kind of with these deals. And you kind of hear about them in the rumors and they kind of usually happen. It's rare where I'm really surprised. Maybe the Mikal Bridges trade definitely surprised me. I knew there was the Villanova connection, but I just it actually being executed kind of surprised me. And that was just a fun big trade.
That move was like Twitter coming to life, though.
Yeah,
it
just
wasn't
like a dream scenario trade.
Expected them to do it.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a list of things I wanted to happen in the offseason, and there still was room for those things to be done. And I just felt like Dario Saric or Šarić. I don't know. I just heard a thing about how you should pronounce it today, Šarić. He was signed, and there's the Russell Westbrook rumors, which we had been talking ourselves kind of into Westbrook and Dario, which it's not like they're slam dunk signings. They still have questions about them and how they're going to be played. So I don't know if it was just because we had that kind of drought of the lack of announcements that now that there's anything, it's pleasing the fans because they just wanted something. They want the roster to be complete. And so I feel like the vibes were high just announcing a signing, just that something happened was nice for Nuggets fans. So I was just kind of in a patient mode. I knew something was going to happen. It was just a matter of time. So
I mean, it had to. We were getting incomplete roster charges.
Yes.
No, I mean, I agree. Like I said on the last show, I think the thing that was bothering me the most, and probably was bothering most of Nuggets Nation online, the very online portion, the most, was the lack of uncertainty, whether they would admit it or not. Because, for the past year and some that I've been a part of this fan base, I've witnessed them be able to turn on a dime and start coping as soon as they knew what the situation was going to be. And that's how I felt. That's what I felt happened as soon as the Dario signing was announced. Oh yeah, we're the league let us get this demon. I can't believe it. This, that, and the other. Matt, you're inside of the organization. And I don't know what intel you could give us about how the front office is thinking about this signing, but something that a lot of fans have been talking about is Dario being used as sort of like a mini Jokic light for the bench, finally being able to have a backup, big, whether you think of him as a center or not, that is able to, be this Jokic facsimile in the minutes when he is off the floor, so that all of these other players that are assembled on this team that are these really good Jokic ball guys not a ton of on-ball skill on this team right now, but everyone plays really well off the ball, for the most part. And that has been seen as sort of maybe where the disconnect is between the Jokic minutes and the non-Jokic minutes. Do you feel that Dario can be that? Do you think that that's how the front office is thinking about the Dario signing? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, Booth loves skilled bigs. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is like he really likes big skilled players. Like I think that's been the hallmark of like his tenure. Although the first year he like kind of targeted athleticism, but since then it's been a lot of like bigger skilled players. So what I like, Denver, right? They run a lot of their offense through their bigs. Especially we've seen a little bit through DeAndre, but obviously mostly Jokic. To me, I really like that you can continue to do that stuff with Dario. So this is a delay or 5-out setup. Denver could run something like this. They'll do some 5-out stuff, maybe not as spread as this clip because obviously Clay and Steph are there, but they will do things like this. So they're basically having Dario up top, initiate everything, and then the two guys on each side, perimeter players, wings, forwards, guards, whatever, are making decisions from there. And this is just an alignment that Denver can go to. They'll do this stuff all the time with Jokic up top. Many times he'll be at the top of the key rather than at the top of the arc, but these are just kind of setups that are going to be really familiar. I think especially when you have a lot of young players, it is good to try to have some continuity from lineup to lineup. And that's the appeal, right, of bringing in somebody like Dario is, hey, you can give Jokic a rest, and it doesn't feel like this seismic change of like, all right, well, now we're going to run high pick and roll through, DeAndre Jordan for 10 minutes or handoffs through Zeke. Like it is kind of like, we're going to continue to do the same thing. Our young players are used to playing this way. And there's more of them this year. And it's just not going to be like, all right, now what? Right. Like now, because sometimes there are games where you're watching the Nuggets and there's kind of like this, like, okay, what are we doing now that Nicola's sitting? Okay, we're going to do this. Like, no, like now you can play kind of the same way and have a guy like this who's so good at, you could play on like if you want, finding cutters like that. Like that's just like a read that I think will be there. And that's the appeal of bringing somebody like Dario in. This is another that's another like 5-out read, sort of three in or 1 out. Sorry, 1 in, 4 out with Dario there, but it's an easy read there. So a lot of like the formations and setups will feel pretty similar to what they've been doing.
Yeah, his ability to just find those reads is very Jokic like, and I'm glad we're talking about this too because this is like every Nuggets fan dream is just like bring someone in where the bench players, if they're playing with Jokic or not, whether they're like playing with a staggered starter or whatever, they're just getting those reps with Jokic and like the off-ball play to have a center or someone we can bring in for him is going to be huge.
For sure. And like every single newcomer, not every, but most newcomers that come in, they're like, it is such a huge change to go from whatever your former team to playing with Jokic because you're getting passes you're not expecting and you're, in situations where you're so open, it's kind of like what is going on in a way, like you almost second guess it. I remember Reggie talked about that a lot last year. Justin talked a little bit about it too. So continuing to play through a big who is so good at finding guys, I think in a way will ease that a little bit, even just in game where it's like, it doesn't feel like the seismic shift. That's a nice little entry pass there. It'll be good like to have somebody that can find guys inside. So if you have Aaron Gordon on the floor with him, you can have Dario make those entry pass reads and kind of find guys from there. This
was cool.
What did I get on here?
Crossing up Naz Reid.
Saric a little behind the back on Naz Reid and then just takes him in, uses the shoulder to get a nice hook shot.
I think I just wanted to show him cooking Naz Reid.
Well, that's perfect. I actually just posted about that because I knew Nuggets fans were going to want to know. Is he going to take it to Nas specifically? This is the hurdle we have to get over.
I was seeing somewhere, I don't know where I saw him. Maybe it was a Warriors fan or it could have been comments. I did a lot of like Dario research over the last couple of days. And they were saying like he really took it to Nas in that game. And I'm like, good, man, because Nas was a pain in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Damn Wolves series.
Exactly.
He's a good player. Also, I mean, the biggest thing is that he's his equity as a like offensive player is his game as a pick and pop player. He's 36% from 3 last year. He can set screens. He can slip out and beat closeouts. This one, he's wide open. He literally is. You can see he's almost surprised with how open he is. So
He's
just
like, oh, you're going to leave me open. And then he knocked it down like confidently, right?
he's a shooter. That's a big thing. If you double off him one pass away, like Minnesota does here, he can make that look. So
it's
he's
even
a shooter.
the Minnesota, and they're clogging the paint here on this shot. You have that 5-out option with him, which is definitely going to be huge for the Nuggets.
I agree. There's one, I think, this is the rescreen. Told you we were going to talk about screening. Nice little rescreen. Doesn't have the angle. Sets up. Looks like a simple play, but like this is super valuable to have as somebody that is going to know, hey, my angle isn't great here. Let me reset this. And then I'm just going to pop behind the arc. Looks confident, no hesitation. Shot goes up. And
using a screen to get himself open, like screening to get himself open.
Yep. So again, just having like that go-to play, that is going to be something that you're going to see a lot from Denver. It might be something that, hey, that might work really well with Westbrook, right? Like if a team tries to duck under a screen against Westbrook, he can kind of use that player to get in the way, kind of how Jokic does of his man or vice versa, and then get open for 3. So having a guy that can do that. I'm curious to see how that looks, because I was kind of sitting like thinking about all the guys that Russ has played with, and it's not like a lot of pick and pop picks. It's really not. It's like Steven Adams, Clint Capella a little bit, although they kind of shelved that and then went PJ Tucker. Last year is Zubac and Tice, I guess, kind of.
Tice, I guess Tice is like the only one
who's like sort of like I guess he's a pick and pop guy, but not like Dario. I think it was
right.
Ryan Black.
There's not a lot of offense running through Tice because usually like Paul George was sharing the floor with those guys in those lineups as well.
They could have made it work when he was in with the Lakers with Anthony Davis if they ever played him at 5, but they never would do it. When
Anthony Davis pick and pops. Okay, well,
they just didn't want to do it, Anthony Davis and Russ were not going to be screening on that team, that's for sure.
AD's also like a pick and like fade to the elbow.
Yeah, that's true.
He doesn't get all the way.
Yeah.
On the line. So I mean, just again, like, and I think it was Blackburn who tweeted this out, who does a great job, by the way.
Love Ryan here.
Great. Fantastic. I think he said something like 50% of Dario's shots were from behind the 3-point line. I have his shot chart in here somewhere.
Oh yeah, here, I'll get that.
That is an analytic.
Oh wow,
that is
actually like it makes sense that he was a Sixer now. Was that under Daryl Morey?
Yeah, isn't that just the most perfect shot chart you've seen? Threes are distributed all across the arc. It's all inside the arc. That's all him just driving closeouts and stuff like that. So he's a pretty clear, what you're getting right from him.
Yeah,
like this is a guy that's gonna pick and pop, but if he has the angle. We've seen him flash the handle a little bit. He can go behind the back. He's not dusting dudes off the dribble. He's not like a guy that's going to like sky for a dunk or anything like that. But you kind of know what you're getting from him in a way. So I think there's some comfort in that, and also comfort in being like, we think this is going to fit pretty well with what we like to do already. We don't have to change things too much. We have a guy who can screen, pop behind the arc, and just find guys in terms of cutters. So I've been excited about Dario before, the Nuggets even signed him or reported to sign him. But
I wanted them to get him last year.
Yeah.
On record.
Yeah.
I may not be on record because I made my Twitter account like a year ago, but it was on my list.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like, probably the thing I didn't think about, and it wasn't till people started doing the like, all right, let's throw the rotations together, is like how much sense he makes for rotations and stuff like that. I kind of viewed it as like, all right, I think I'd want somebody that's going to help on the glass and, provide like real defensive infrastructure in the backup center. And then when I started looking at lineups, I'm like, boy, I don't really know how well, like, I don't really know if you want to, let's throw like Andre Drummond. Like, is Andre Drummond and Westbrook and like, is that really a cohesive bench unit? Like, I don't know. I don't know if that feels as cohesive.
Oh, well, I mean, I wanted Drummond, but that was before like Westbrook was like a in the distance possibility.
That's the
So
thing,
I
though.
don't know that I like that fit.
I don't either. I don't really like that. So if you're penciling in Westbrook, you're like, oh, you would kind of make sense to have a guy that can space a little bit and set screens and like try to drag another guy or two guys out of the perimeter onto the perimeter. So once that kind of seemed like the Westbrook thing really seemed real and like there's like that's a possibility, somebody like Dario did make a lot more sense. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be certain things that bench unit has to do. Like the rebounding will be a key thing all year. Westbrook is a good rebounder, funny enough. But there are going to be like things that unit won't be as good at just inherently. But I do think like when you're looking at how everything's coming together, like it does make sense to have somebody like Dario who is just a pure 3-point spacer.
Yeah, so if we are playing him, because there's been some like Dario Saric diehard fans who are saying he is not a center. Do not play him at the 5 ever, because his defense on 5s is not good. But it's like you guys are saying, if we have a spacing 5 with Westbrook or just having a whole lineup that can space, it kind of doesn't matter whether like DeRozan's playing a 4, he's playing a 5. But I mean, defensive matchups are going to be more pertinent in that case. But if you do talk about him kind of at the 5 position, because I believe the last kind of clips that you pulled up are like some post up works. So it's like on offense, he
Yes,
can score in the post.
for sure.
But so if you want to talk about that a little bit, and then, defensive weaknesses or other weaknesses that maybe fans should be aware of that could like hamper the bench potentially.
Yeah, I think like the post up stuff is really enticed. I think he was 64th percentile or something like that. The Warriors,
Okay.
like a pretty good
It's fine for a
1.01.
backup big. That's just, yeah, that's good.
1.0,
That is better than like any half court offense the bench has had in years.
It's like real offense. Like you get real offense out of running things out of the post from him. He's been a good post player for a while. So like that's just another option. I think I included a couple of clips of him just like this is against Fox, right? Yeah, like if he gets a small on him, like if you run this pick and pop between him and Westbrook or whoever, him and Jamal, and the other team switches, like he's just gonna go straight down into the post again. Feels a lot like Jokic, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly
Yeah,
the
just
type
like
of offense you're running. And then he's making reads from there. He's either trying to score himself or he's dotting it out to the weak side, finding the shooter in the corner, finding the shooter on the in the slot. So it's just like again, I'm gonna keep saying it, but like there's such a sense of familiarity. You almost watch him and you're like, I'm surprised this guy isn't a Nugget or like he hasn't been a Nugget
right.
already.
Yes,
It is
I
funny.
agree.
So there's a lot of familiarity in a way. Yeah, on defense, I mean, he's not like a crazy shot blocker. I think he's blocked somewhere in the 90s, like 90 total shots in his career. Rebounding was a little better than I
Yeah,
figured. He's I think 70th, 80th percentile rebounder.
especially good defensive rebounder.
Yeah, which is good. And that's important. You want your like backup center to clean up on the defensive glass.
Don't you?
Yes, you do. So I think that part is definitely going to get figured out. But that's where you have like somebody like Peyton, who's really good on the weak side. Holmes seems like he could be pretty good from the weak side. It's definitely unique, I think, to be like your defense, your bench defense, be so. I don't say reliant, but I also don't really know what other word. But I kind of like reliant on like weak side rotation.
Yeah.
But you also have like God, like
it's the same thing
like
with our starters when you think about it.
Yeah, like with Mike, yeah, and all that.
Right, and there's more to it too. I mean, there are obviously like it goes into like how you're defending pick and rolls. Like they protect Nikola in so many different ways, and Nikola has like gotten a lot better at like
But like, don't put your big in space with an NBA guard. There's like that's just dumb. Like no team should do that. So I don't care how good of a defender your center is in space. Like,
and they have like a lot of like if this is a defense, and I see them like for me, I do think they're gonna. I mean, it's just me like guessing. Honestly, I'm for looking at like the roster. I think they'll be pretty aggressive. Like we'll get a lot of traps on the ball. And just trying to get the ball out of the ball handler's hands. And that bench unit, like in theory, is like young. It's got like a lot of energy to it. it should be able to rotate around. Payton, like I look at him a lot defensively, and I think he's really like the same way that I was saying like Julian's so important for the offense on the bench because he's a movement shooter. He can space from so far out, which just gives, like, if you're running Westbrook, Šarić pick and roll, him being able to space 28 feet out is super important. Payton's also so important because of his ability to like rotate, put out fires, and he did that a lot. I mean, I think Julian, like, also that's another guy that's like in the right spots a lot. I've loved his low man rotations all year.
Yeah, like I like Julian's off-ball defense a lot too.
Loved him. So like
I'm really looking forward to that Nuggets knowledge about him.
Thank you. It's nerdy. But yeah, like in theory, if you're playing really aggressive, you have a guy who's like a total chaos agent in Payton, and you have a guy in Julian who's like in the right spots a lot. Like that's the semblance of something like that. That is, so I can see how it would work in theory, but we'll see it put in like practice,
find out. Well, maybe it'll work because if they end up getting Russell Westbrook, that's another chaos agent on the floor, for better or worse. So with the re-signing of Vlatko, we have now 7 options in the front court with Vlatko, Dario, Holmes, Zeke, who's still on the roster, Aaron Gordon, Jokic, and Hunter Tyson. Half of the team is kind of 4.5s. I guess you could call Aaron like the only like true 4 there, and maybe Hunter Tyson's like a 3-4, but 4.5s and 5s, right? And I made this joke the other day that when you think about the lack of ball handling depth on the team now, it seems like Calvin Booth has gone sort of completely away from like Tim Conley's sort of proclivity for small skilled guards on the team in favor of like this very large front court, and that seems to be where a lot of the focus has been, especially this offseason. Does this sort of like extreme depth at like the forward and center positions tell you anything about how the front office was thinking about where they needed to target the deficiencies in this roster after last season?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like pretty much like a reflection of, man, that Timberwolves team is really big. Let's just literally add more tall players. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to look at it. And again, like I think Booth has certainly, like, every year he kind of has like an archetype in mind. And I think that was like a big part of the evaluation process. I also just think having like I'm going to call it interchangeability, or kind of just revolving chairs of the backup center, was not a situation that I think anybody wanted to go into. You know, like, I mean, because it's like the only position like that last year where it felt like we were getting a different guy every couple of games. So I think having like a concrete option was the idea here, right? With Šarić or Holmes next to him or whoever, but like Šarić, really, I think just being that solid, we're going to have this backup 5, and just like, you want to give Nikola a rest.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
that's like the biggest thing I was looking at, is giving AG a rest too, because we have been saying AG is going to be the backup 5 in the playoffs. It's all good, everyone, and it's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those units like crushed in the 2023 playoffs, and then last year they were like not effective at all. So
can I tell you like what happened in the Wolves series? Because our bench was actually crushing them in the AG at center minutes until the second half of that series, when Chris Finch decided to start mirroring Rudy's minutes with AG's.
Yep.
And that made really all the difference, just because like Rudy provided that stabilizing presence. A lot of people don't think this, but on offense as well as the defense for the Wolves. And that made it a lot more difficult, and they had nothing else to go to. So once the starters were like losing their minutes and they started losing those AG at center minutes as well, it was pretty much curtains, as we saw.
I agree. It's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, Rudy. What's like Minnesota got away from like the Rudy, like that? What was that, game 5? Where they're like,
it was game 5, yeah.
Oh, the one-on-one like, with Rudy. Yeah.
We said in our series preview, like, they should not put Rudy on Jokic in single coverage. That is not what they should do, and they probably won't unless. And then That was what happened in game 5.
Right.
They didn't do it again. And, I guess
Yeah.
they learned their lesson.
Unless they just thought Jokic was going to like get 50 points in that game and be really tired in the next one because he like had to score every single time. And maybe that did tire him out, but I would be surprised if that was like a strategy they
Well,
actually
the
use,
next
like
game,
intentionally lose a game.
They were not leaving him in single coverage with anybody but like Cat, but even then they were helping off of others. So
I blocked game 6 out. I truly cannot tell you what happened in that game.
It was like 6 minutes and then it was over. So we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah, we've been going with these forwards, but like Matt said earlier, like that's kind of Booth's thing with these skilled big men. And I think a lot of Nuggets fans were thinking we'd go for a more stereotypical 5, like true center option to spell Jokic, kind of like DJ, but younger. But I think as we see, we're going all like floor spacing, kind of, more small ball 5 bigs, like even with DeRozan, even though he's 6'10", he can space, which I'm interested to see. But are you like concerned with like even if we added Russ, do we need? I mean, I know we have young guys like Trey Alexander and those players and Pickett.
Right.
Do you think that's enough to go into the season, or how are you feeling about where we're at on that front?
Yeah, I mean it's thin. Like I even just like the fact like the wings aren't like particularly, which I guess would be the interesting part about like Julian trying to improve his ball handling, playmaking skills. You saw Christian kind of experiment with that last year. I think there were things that he added that helped, but I also think like there was a lot of stuff thrown on his plate, and it felt like just the first couple months, like he just kind of was like, there's so much newness to it that once things simplified for him, like once he had less responsibility, it's like, oh, there's Christian Braun. It was like, right? Like, so
but he was also on ball a lot less after things started to click because things simplified for him.
Right. And it became a little bit less of like, all right, we're going to have Christian Braun run pick and roll. It's going to be like, all right, Christian, like grab a rebound and like dribble it up. And then we're going to get, Jamal the ball after he's coming off ball. Right. So like, yeah, I think for me, like, sure, like the point guard position is thin. And like, if Jamal gets hurt or whoever, like, then you're like, all right, like we need Westbrook to start. And then Pickett needs to be ready, honestly, like to play. We're going to see where all those guys are in the next week. I think the wings for me, just like, it's so valuable to have these 6'8" guys that are able to we talked about DeRozan at the top. DeRozan's like a guy that you can run a pick and roll. You can come off a handoff. He can make plays for other guys. He's what, 6'7", 6,
yeah, 6'6",
something like that. So there isn't a ton of that, and maybe the idea is like, like somebody like Julian can develop into that. Those guys
are hard to find. Secondary ball handling, secondary playmaking juice would have come in really handy this past year, and could come in handy this next year, depending on how much progress Christian makes with that, how much progress we see Julian make with that as well.
But I think that hits on like there is like for the roster to be optimized, there are going to be like little growth points that you're going to need from someone of one of the young guys. So I think that's where that kind of comes in and like ties all that together, is that like you do need some of those skills to show up, because right now you can make do with certain guys, but it's like I just don't know if that skill is like one that I would say is like a strength of the roster for sure.
Right. Yeah. And, we're seeing with, through last offseason and this offseason, the way that roster building in the NBA more and more, because of the, changes to the collective bargaining agreement, is becoming this, you're having to make choices about where to allocate your resources. Right. And it seems like the front court is a bigger priority right now. And on top of that, they are choosing to make these sort of calculated gambles on things like ball handling. Let's actually get into that, because you and I have had a little bit of back and forth, online, offline, off the podcast, about the CBA and which groups of players have been impacted and will be impacted in the future. The first group of players that actually comes to mind after the last couple of days is actually the very upper class of the NBA, because is a group that even on our last show, when I was talking, when Will and I were discussing this with NBA Chicken, I thought that for at least the foreseeable future, teams were going to just pay their max guys. Those are the ones that are going to be least impacted, at least in the short term, by the CBA. But then we see that obviously Paul George doesn't get to stay in LA to get his max. He still gets it, and he gets his full 4 years that he wanted, but he has to move to Philadelphia. We saw Klay Thompson leave the Warriors because they weren't going to give him a max. They also weren't going to give him like the years that he wanted, even if he would have taken a lower number. But that was another one where, maybe a couple of years ago, even in his current state, Golden State might have been willing to just fork over that contract. Over the last couple of days, we got news that Jamal Murray has not yet signed his max extension with the Nuggets, and there may be some friction there in the negotiations, whether it's about the dollar figure or other stipulations. And then even earlier, like we saw some sort of signs of this with Kawhi Leonard's extension with the Clippers, where he gets slightly less than a full max. He takes a little bit of a deal for the team, and the contract is only for 3 years. So my question to you is whether the upper class of the NBA is being impacted more and faster than maybe you would have thought a year ago when the CBA first came into effect.
Yeah, I was under the impression it was like the middle class was going to get squeezed out. And the middle class is just, goodness, what a time. What a time to be the middle class.
I know. I'm just like, I thought the middle class was getting squeezed, but then there's all these players that I thought would be within the Nuggets range, and they're like getting paid at least double what I thought they'd get in free agency.
It's weird. So that's been odd. I think the big thing that comes, like the big thing right now is like, it's not just a like foregone conclusion of like, all right, we have this rookie we like, think he's pretty good. Like we drafted him really high. Let's extend him or whatever. Like, it's a guy we've had. It's a little bit more of that decision making because it is so like you're so impacted if you have multiple max guys that now it feels like every team is like, ooh, like max contract. I don't know. This is just me like looking and reading things and just seeing what's happening, but it's like, max contract is like a little bit of a scary word. I don't know how else to like put it, but like it is kind of like it feels like there's a lot of thought process going into that because those things are such like a heavy percentage of your cap. So that part I didn't expect, and I kind of figured that it would just be middle class guys getting squeezed out. Teams would be like, yeah, like we just got to keep our guys. We got to keep our main two guys. And instead, it's been a lot of the opposite, where it's like, is this guy that we're thinking about offering a max contract? Is that somebody we want to make this giant financial commitment to? I guess in a way, which maybe I should have thought of more. I don't know, but it certainly has been surprising for me. I go back and forth like on this new CBA all the time because sometimes there's a part of me that's like, this sucks. Like we're just breaking up really good teams.
Yeah.
But then there is the part of me that I think it's so interesting because I love like the team building aspect of things. I think it's so cool how many different ways you can build your teams. And even the way teams right now are approaching this new CBA, like I think you brought up on last podcast where you talked about Golden State, like really ducked under and got full access to the MLE. Denver's got the tax MLE. Boston's just like,
and the sign and trade because they use that to get Buddy Hield.
Right. And then you look at somebody like Boston, they're like, we'll deal with it later. Our team's awesome. Like
we'll let somebody else deal with it later. They're selling the team.
So you can be blamed,
which is maybe more telling than any of the actual roster moves that they made.
But it's like really, the part of me that loves like the philosophy aspect of it, it's added more of that in there. Like there are just so many different ways to look at how you build a team. There are more penalties for building teams certain ways. So that part of me really thinks this is interesting. And just the fact that we don't have an answer. Like we don't know which way is the best way to do it. Like maybe it is the best. Boston could win two more titles in a row because they paid all these guys and they don't have a 2023 draft pick or whatever, and they're like, we literally do not care. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
No,
Or
they don't care because they are selling the team.
Yeah,
The
right,
people
fair,
that are saying
fair. But whoever's running that
Yeah.
over there. But it is just kind of like it. We don't know.
Yeah.
And it reminds me a lot of 2016 when there was that cap spike, and everybody's got cap space, and so many people, teams use it different ways. Golden State gets Durant, that really works. Then there's other teams that throw crazy money, 4-year deals. I think the Lakers threw like a bunch of those deals out, and that didn't work, right? So I like these inflection points and like times where there is a pretty seismic change, and we see what works and what doesn't work years later, because we don't know. And I think a lot of the front offices and stuff are like trying to figure this out on the fly too, because there just is like so many changes. I feel like I learn a new thing about this CBA every single day.
Yeah.
I thought I knew all of the like big bad things about the second apron, and then I learned more right before our last episode. No, like the way that you're describing it in terms of this like inflection point, and everyone is sort of like kind of riding the chaos wave and trying to like get through it, reminds me of that little finger quote from Game of Thrones where he says that chaos is a ladder, and we'll just like see who comes out on top.
Well, it's like Matt was saying, we don't know the effects of this CBA and what the best strategies are going to be from a front office perspective. I think even before we started seeing how this would affect deals being made with free agency as we're seeing now, people were wondering if, the best strategy front offices could do is to convince their stars to take pay cuts, which is kind of interesting because the league is very player power friendly. And
especially the stars.
Yeah, and players are all about getting paid and getting even everyone in the NBA paid. They celebrate people getting paid. And now LeBron, the face of the league for however many years, is had multiple times now he tried to like get the team. I don't remember what it was, like did he try to get them the taxpayer mid-level exception or something?
Well, he offered to take a bigger pay cut, but they didn't come up with one of the players that it would have been worth it for him to do that.
Which
so he didn't do that.
Funny even in its own right, to strike out that many times. And then, but now, he's taking a pay cut just to have the organization under the second apron. And so that's a solid by him. And it seems like even the players, if LeBron's doing this, most teams are viewing staying out of the second apron as the most kind of competitive thing you can still do because you're more flexible and such. It may be except for if you're the Celtics, because history does say like these really expensive rosters with these very proven star players that are championship level are worth paying for, because you see like the Warriors and things of that nature. I don't know if we'll see that ever again, but what do you make of like players like LeBron taking pay cuts, and is it like setting a precedent, or is it something the NBA PA is going to have to look at?
So this is such a comment. It's really early, I would say, and I think as we get more and more into it, we'll kind of learn more about it. LeBron is like, Lakers are doing him some solids too right now.
That's true. The biggest solid you could do.
some solids going on.
That's true. I didn't even think about that.
So
hey, we got your son on the team, so save us some cash. We don't have that much cash over here.
4-year guaranteed deal. He's got an NBA contract.
Listen, it's
Bronny James.
It's a
taking up a roster spot.
It's a good story, right? Like so.
Yeah.
But I mean, LeBron's kind of tricky because I do think there is even just like I think JJ. I actually think JJ is gonna be pretty good, but JJ even getting there, like a lot of that, it felt like was set up by LeBron, even though he probably would say he had no input in that.
Well, I don't know. Say, like it wouldn't have happened if LeBron weren't there.
For sure. Like, there's those two just like the Lakers and LeBron seem to be working very hand in hand. So. That's a situation, but still, I mean, he did take a pay cut. Like it's LeBron James taking a pay cut.
Yeah.
But I mean, Tatum got paid. Like there are like a lot of big name guys that are getting paid out.
And even like when there's a difference between these different max contracts, right? We just saw the other day, Franz Wagner's getting a rookie scale max deal from the Magic. There were a lot of people that were up in arms about it, and a lot of people that were up in arms against the people that were up in arms about it as well, because Franz Wagner is definitely a favorite of like analytics Twitter. And we're still waiting to see if the Cavs are going to give Evan Mobley a max. I think Cade Cunningham just got his rookie scale max from the Pistons. Then on the flip side of that, we haven't heard anything about like, oh, are the Rockets going to do something with Şengün? Maybe, maybe not. Whereas maybe 6 months ago, it seemed like a no-brainer kind of move, in particular because of just how good Şengün has been. And I think even under the new CBA, like the Rockets should probably just do that. But from all reports, it sounds like they're probably going to ride into next summer so that they can maximize their flexibility next year. And so I guess like a team that has the mindset that they're like not necessarily about trying to find their young star player. They're just like accumulating assets, young assets that can be useful in like a trade for a established star later down the line. Yeah, I think that's because we're talking about like the difference between these like veteran maxes and the rookie scale maxes. There are all these like subgroups within the NBA player salary scale, right? And so like, we've talked mostly about the middle class, like leading up to, doing this podcast episode. And one of the things I think I've been trying to sort of weigh is how much of a positive impact the salary floor, which is one of the newer, like more positive things on the whole from the player perspective in the new CBA, in that now teams have to spend at least 90% of the salary cap. So you can't have like, a situation like I think it was the Houston Rockets last year that were like barely spending like 60 or 70% of the cap or something, and then nothing else. And that space was just there.
Right.
So now teams have to spend money. And I'm just going to like ask you about it, but here are a couple of prominent examples over the last 2 off seasons that I think are a direct impact of that rule. Last summer, I think that Bruce's 2 for 45 with the second-year team option probably doesn't happen. Even if Indiana is gearing up to make a big move, I just don't think that they feel the need to make that signing if they could just like keep their cap space clear, but they couldn't because of the new rules. So that's one. Isaiah Hartenstein, like the Oklahoma City Thunder had to spend that money somewhere. So they went out and tried to find the biggest impact player that they could get on free agency, and that was iHeart, and they shoved like mountains of money in his face. I think that contract is probably on an annual basis the biggest any free agent that's changing teams this offseason besides Paul George.
Yep.
And then Detroit gave Simone Fontecchio a 2-year, $16 million deal, which I don't think is crazy, but I also don't know how committed Detroit is to like keeping good players or like building a coherent roster in normal times. But those are just some of the ones that really stick out to me. Jock Landale got the 4-year deal from the Houston Rockets last summer, although they're like a weird outlier to all of the different examples that we'll go through today.
Right.
Because they did like long-term deals for like all new veteran guys. But yeah, what do you think about really like the discourse around how the CBA is impacting the middle class of NBA players, especially in free agency, and weighing it against, it feels like the salary floor itself is sort of under discussed in that context.
For sure. That's a great point. I totally agree. And you're making me aware of it right now. So there you go. But I totally agree. Like it does give the opportunity for guys to get paid that, maybe wouldn't have in years past, or maybe they would have, but maybe it wouldn't have been.
Would Jock Landale get a 4-year, $8 million year deal though?
That's like, hey, listen, that's the Jokic effect right there.
Yeah.
For like 6 possessions, they're like, just pay this guy. But I think it's really interesting because one, it gives like teams that aren't necessarily free agent destinations all the time, it gives them the opportunity to get talent. Beyond that, like you're getting, for the most part, like mid-sized deals that you can use in trades. So maybe somebody asks out on their team and they're like, I want to go to the Lakers. And the Lakers are like, we literally can't fit you on this team. And all of a sudden you're whoever, like, let's take Indiana last year, great example, sign Bruce, and Bruce gets paid. It's what he wanted. It's what the entire Nuggets team wanted for Bruce, is to get paid. He's shows up, Indiana plays there, and then Indiana is able to swing and get somebody like Pascal Siakam. So there's just it ensures more parity in a way, but it also in the end it might hurt certain teams that are building organically. It's really weird. I can't quite. That's the part of the CBA that I don't know how I feel about yet. Because in a way, it does create more equal opportunity where it's like you're not necessarily like, I'll say, a marquee destination. You're able to get like a big name free agent, which at this point, not a ton of like super duper stars. You're going to get these like really good players that would be really valuable pieces on a team with existing stars or super duper stars. But if you do build organically, like, let's take our Denver Nuggets, and you draft well and you make the right trades, well, then you're kind of squeezed out by these new apron penalties that get enacted in the middle of your window. So, yeah, I'm so mixed on it because it is kind of like it's such a seismic change. I'm surprised there wasn't like an amnesty or something like that introduced with some of these things, because it is like a huge change. I don't even think they're starting to catch on like how much of a change it was.
So many sports leagues always are sometimes slow to make changes, or they'll do trial periods or whatever. And so this whole plan that they've implemented right away, I mean, I know that front offices had time to like try to understand it before it all happened, but so many of these teams' foundations were already built.
No. Well, I'm sorry.
It's not like it just came out right before.
They had draft texts of the CBA at most 2 weeks before it came into effect on July 1st last year.
Yeah.
And then the final version, because I was waiting for it because I wanted to read it, did not come out until a week before free agency.
Yeah, the final. Yeah. Well,
that's not a lot of time to get through a 600-page document.
I'm sure everyone would want more time with this, but it does kind of create some interesting scenarios, like fewer teams with this large cap space. Like Paul George only had a couple destinations he could even go to. OKC was one of them. So it's cool that like unique opportunities are being brought up for certain players that you wouldn't have guessed. But I don't know if like we were talking last show with NBA Chicken how like maybe deals would be structured or set up in a way where they'll all end at the same time to like anticipate having a huge cap space. I don't know, like
where Daryl Morey.
Yeah, I don't know.
That'd be so weird.
Like,
yeah,
there'll be like 6 teams that have 80 million plus in cap space in the same offseason. That would be wild.
If
like
cap space
contending
comes back,
teams. If cap space comes back. So actually I have a specific question with Philly, because in their situation, they really needed Paul George to sign there, because Daryl Morey's whole plan for this offseason was to have this cap space and try to bag a star. Their kind of plan B would have been DeMar DeRozan, and they could have given him a max. But that's frankly just not the same caliber of player. Right. It would have been a disaster by their standards, especially given the sort of, Joel I think he's 31 now. He's going to be entering his age 32 season. And honestly, like in my opinion, I thought they needed more high level role players than they got or even were necessarily pursuing. I especially have issues with the way that they've not invested in wing defense over the last couple of seasons, but that was not their plan. So by their standards, it would have been a disaster if they had not gotten Paul George. And he might have gone back to the Clippers. In that situation, they have all this cap space, but they don't have assets that they can use to trade for, a star to fill that space, or assets that they're at least willing to part with, right? I think they have, I think on draft night, they would have had 3, maybe 4 draft picks available to trade, but they were their own, and it would have been like an all-in move, right? They had to give him the 4-year deal because it had to be enough to pry him away from LA, had to make that worth it for him. They sent Dr. J to recruit him. They sent Joel to the finals to go tamper on the anchoring desk at the game. That's one of the reasons I just don't think that the cap space route is going to be super feasible, is because it's so risky if you're a team like Philly that you're like, if you miss out on the thing you're looking for, now you don't have the assets to trade for, players that are like already signed. Because I feel like there are other parts of the CBA that heavily favor just keep extending guys that are already on your roster. So other teams will have guys that are not entering free agency that maybe you want, but now you don't have assets because you created all this cap space, but didn't, maintain assets in other ways. So there's this tension here. And I feel like maybe some people are looking at the Philadelphia example this offseason and saying, oh my God, cap space is back. But I was looking at this summer thinking like this could be an abject disaster if they don't get Paul George.
Yeah.
Probably depends on the summer, right? Like you're probably looking at how many teams have cap space. And I think about like this new CBA of like, it's just so much like unknown. Nobody knows what the best way to do it. And, maybe cap space is the way to go. Maybe not. Maybe you want to keep your books really clean and, you don't want to
have all these different philosophies now. And they're being tested more than ever because I feel like the CBA puts a lot more pressure on the sort of minute decisions of a front office.
Oh,
because
for sure.
The margins matter so much.
So much.
Yeah.
Like every single thing you do is, like everything you do is punitive. I mean, even like if you get, like, let's say you're the Nuggets and like you have Christian Braun and Peyton Watson and Julian Strawther, like if those guys are good, like eventually those rookie deals expire. So those are even decisions down the line. So it's like the decision making never ends in a way. And I think anytime you make like a giant seismic huge change to an economy, it won't be reflected right away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll see it kind of more down the line. And it's just kind of like time will tell with what that looks like and what the best ways to go about it. Because it felt like, before this new CBA, teams were so comfortable with like the whole like, all right, so you like extend all your guys, then they might force a trade, and then you just trade them for like 5 first rounders, and then you get your first rounders back, and then you just draft, and you just kind of repeat the process. Like, so, and now it's like we don't know what we do, right? Like, so
I feel like the league must be more satisfied with this, where trading and stuff like that may be a little more tough. You can't just like ask for a trade anymore. Like the way you're fitting rosters together, it's more complicated because I know they didn't like the look of stars just asking out. And that kind of leads me to this question, which kind of leads back to the Nuggets, and then we'll finish up with our last segment. Yeah, so we've been talking about the Nuggets specifically, and you just talked about, Christian Braun and P. Watt. Even like the Thunder, people are seeing scenarios where like J-Dub and Chet and their young people are going to get paid. And I think a lot of the people that I've heard already talking about a change for the NBA always mention like giving some kind of cap relief or something for teams who drafted these max players, some kind of mechanic to keep them on the team. Because, the Supermax was developed to keep superstars with teams originally. We've seen it only kind of function that way a couple times. But do you see the NBA like implementing even just something like that quickly before we like really know how this shakes out? Or are they going to give time to let it develop? And would you even like the idea of like giving some kind of relief for drafted players?
I would personally. Yeah. I think like it almost penalizes you for doing a good job.
Yeah.
Like I just brought up the Nuggets. Like if PY and Christian and Julian all pan out, instead of it being like, boy, like look at how good we were at drafting and developing, it's like, well, what do we do now? Like, how do we squeeze this in? And are you going to take a team-friendly deal?
Even like, drafting and developing well.
It's weird. It's I don't know. I mean, I guess like right now, I get it. You want to keep everything even, right? Like you want to give everybody equal opportunity, but there has to be some degree of like, hey, you did the hard stuff, like the drafting and the developing and like the, that's the really, really hard stuff that's really hard to do. And certain teams do really well and other teams don't do as well. Like if you just remove that in a way, I don't know. It just feels different. And I don't know. So I think that would be like a pretty logical change to make, right? Or like at least test it out, flesh it out, see how it works. Because right now it's just like you're kind of screwed a little bit, no matter what you do, and no matter maybe that's what that's what the NBA wants, is like we want this to be like you are making really tough decisions all the time, and it keeps like that competitive side of things really ripe. But I don't know. I would be like I think that would be like a pretty logical thing to add in, especially if you're an OKC and you're like, man, like we don't know if we want to cross the second apron. Does that mean we have to let somebody like J-Dub go or something like that? You know, because then you run into different, you know, you run into like the same situation the Thunder ran into 2013 where Harden leaves because of salary cap things. So, yeah, I would say that's like a pretty logical thing to add in, but we'll see how it goes. It's all on the teams, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think it's like just the last thing that I'll say on this is one of the things that I think a lot about basketball and why the best players in basketball seem to have an outsized impact in this sport compared to other sports. Like the very best players can't have quite the same level of difference making on a particular game as in basketball. The more that we get like deeper into the CBA, it seems like the front office. I was comparing like the impact of like the coach in like football compared to basketball. It's like just not as much in basketball. Like a bad coach is bad, but like mediocre coach is whatever. It's really about like the best players on your roster. But it feels like with the CBA, with every marginal move potentially being incredibly punitive one way or the other, and as we get more parity with the level of talent, particularly at the top of the league, being spread out across across all of these different teams, the role players and the moves on the margin become so much more important that the quality of the front office and the decisions they make starts to have that same sort of like, oh, that's the difference maker now.
Right.
That's the what is it that they call it in business? Like they're always trying to like find a niche, or like where can we like maximize the margins here, whatever it is.
Right.
But it's all in like these decisions that the front office makes. And a couple of years ago, the Nuggets really hit when they got Bruce, because like I said, that was malpractice by the league, and that turned out to be incredibly, valuable for the Nuggets in 2023. And now we're trying to like hit on these young guys early, and we'll see how that ends up working out. Meanwhile, other teams are like, we're just going to push all our chips in and whatever, like, sacrifice the future. And that's the decision that they're making, because they want to contend as best as they think that they can right now. Yeah, so front offices, lots of pressure on you guys. So if you don't like that feeling, you should blame the owners for voting for this CBA, as well as the Players Association.
I thought one of my other thoughts, like looking at this new CBA, is like if every roster is, let's just say, like getting stripped down, like eventually, like even like Boston, like maybe Boston is to move off guys, doesn't it not really pay off to have like the best player? Like technically, if everything is getting stripped down and you have like, all right, well, all of our talent baselines are going down over time or whatever, like at least where your money's being allocated. That's one of my thoughts. I was like, maybe this actually really helps, because the Nuggets have Jokic, and if he's playing against other teams that are like having to make tough financial decisions as well, like does that kind of help, I guess, in a way? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
but it makes me more nervous because I know he's the best player, but I know that that's becoming less and less. It feels like that's becoming less and less important to the question of which team wins a playoff series. Like the team with the best player, not necessarily, right? Because you have to think about everything else about the roster.
But I get what you're saying, because it's like Jokic just so transcended that it's like, if the playing field's kind of leveled and you have someone that huge that's like raising the floor of a team because he's just so good and he's getting guys paid, it doesn't matter who you're going to bring in, he's going to maximize them. Then I could see that for sure. It's going to be I just don't know how it's going to shake out.
He is getting guys paid, but like
that's the problem.
Been saying this all off season. Why doesn't that is the pitch? Like, look at every single guy that comes to get paid every time.
Saric is going to
be. He just got his team option picked up, another $8 million. And last offseason, I wasn't sure he was going to get more than a minimum. That's another one of these just like, and this last offseason, centers have been making at least double what I thought they would go for in any particular instance, right? We talked about Hartenstein, but Nick Claxton got his 4-year, $100 million deal. We saw Goga Bitadze, who I thought might be a minimum guy, get $8 million for 3 years from the Magic. And we saw Valanciunas get around what I thought he would get, actually, from the Wizards. And obviously, we saw all the bigs that got drafted in this most recent draft. So I'm going to choose to believe that's the Jokic effect, but I also don't like it because I liked having that size edge. But it seems like everyone's catching on that you can't just be tiny anymore.
Well, those are like middle class guys going to like Eastern Conference teams. So again, if you're losing those middle class guys, they're all going elsewhere. In theory, if you're a contender, I don't know. This is just my big brain idea. It could be like totally wrong.
I could see like either side. I could see either thing. It's just a matter of seeing how this works out.
Okay, well, that is enough nerd talk about the CBA. I'm sure we will have more opportunities to continue to flesh this out as we learn more about it this offseason and in the coming off seasons as well. Especially like there's going to be plenty to talk about leading up to the trade deadline too. But what I want to talk about next is the Nuggets and their upcoming season. Who have the biggest redemption arcs, do you think? And or who has the most to gain next season when it comes to their story, their narrative as a player and as a member of this team?
Biggest redemption? Yeah, I mean, I think like, I don't know what happens with the contract stuff, so I don't know how that factors into things, but Jamal is like a good one for me. Just him playing 82 games or close to that, I think would be really nice. I just felt like a really frustrating year from afar. You could like sense it in his pressers. Like he was just like annoyed that he would get going and then he'd get hurt and then he'd try to, play himself back in shape. Because that's part of like when you're injured, but the other part is like you're just not playing live game reps while everybody else is. So it's like other teams are getting 82 games, getting their win, getting everything. And if you keep having these like breaks, that sucks. Like that really messes up your rhythm. So I think that would be a big one for me, is just like the year of Jamal. Because like Jamal, like it's kind of weird. I feel like, I don't know, like maybe this is just me like yelling at a cloud, but like I feel like I don't know, like he was so good in the 2023.
Like
so
and
amazing.
We don't talk about it anymore. And I don't know, maybe this
not in good ways anyway.
And it's like, damn, like that dude's like really good when he's like physically healthy and like gelling. He's like fills the rhythm of the game. Like that guy's just efficient. He's like the heart of the team, honestly, just in terms of like the energy that he gives the crowd, the energy that he gives the team. I mean, even this year, like he still had those moments. He hits the game winners, game 7, like that first half completely energized everything. So he's my number one pick for sure. I'm high on Jamal this year. I think this is like one of those times where Jamal is like Jamal loves the narrative, I think, in a way.
I think he does. He seems like he's incredibly online as well.
Yeah, that's true. That too. But he does. Like when that whole thing, like, so they go down 2-0, right, against Minnesota, and Malone says he shows the team, the all the highlight clips of talking
ESPN,
heads.
like everyone.
Guess who played better than anybody on the floor in game 3?
In game 3, yeah.
Jamal.
That was
This is
Jamal.
like
The
this
Jamal
is set
booze.
It's set up to be the year of Jamal. Like it's like the like, oh, I don't know, like is this guy like worth a max? Like blah, blah, blah. And like there's all this chatter, and this just feels like the Jamal setup. I'm kind of ready for it. So he's probably my number one for me. That I'm just like, I think that it would just make too much sense, right?
Yeah.
For this to be the year where Jamal is like all-star level, awesome season, plays all 80 games, is right when everybody's like, oh yeah, I don't know, man.
Watch him make all NBA and then the dynasty's over because he gets a supermax. Like I thought we were out of the woods after last season.
It just feels like it's ready to be written. Like I'm ready to write that story. It's like the Jamal,
Well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this question in terms of like who has the most to gain next season?
Matt, you're definitely right. Jamal proved himself so much in that championship run that it was like he almost had no questions left to answer. And I thought he would come into the other season like really confident because he just like showed what he could do. And then he kind of has this season, so he does seem like someone who kind of needs the chip on his shoulder and like the narrative to be against him. He's the bright lights merchant, and this whole season's the bright light like season for him. So
Right.
he's gonna do it every game.
Yeah.
But I do think about MPJ too, just because I feel
Mm.
like he's kind of underappreciated by fans because they don't necessarily realize how vital he is to the offense and just how much better he can make the Nuggets. Yeah, and the defense. Just
The
everything he
rebounding.
does. I
Yeah.
mean, the starting five. I know we just lost KCP, so I mean, I want to see how it looks. But if MPJ can just add like he could have a really good shooting season and then have like a kind of lull in a playoff series again, and fans are going to be pissed. So I want to see like a really consistent playoffs from him, which is a long time away. But during the regular season, just adding a couple little things to his game, or even just the Nuggets stylistically adding in something that could feature him a little more. I'm not expecting him to like add in all this playmaking stuff like that, like, but just a little bit here and there around his game that could really show that he's really worth his contract because I still think he already is, but there's just a lot of doubt and even a lot of narratives. He seems like the expendable one, the one you could trade necessarily, like the most tradable contract to break up if we want to add some pieces. We'll let KCP walk instead of doing that this offseason. So, yeah, I'm just kind of looking at MPJ and seeing how he does because he played 81 games and I think he'll do it again. And yeah, I just like how he looks. And
I'd actually
I
prefer
don't.
if he didn't play 81 games.
Yeah, that's
Because
true. Then we're not
it'd be
running
super
him
cool
ragged.
if we had like a 6-game lead on the rest of the West going into
Yeah.
April, and then they get to coast the rest of the way. That'd be super cool.
How
actually.
healthy we were was actually such a gift and a curse.
I
Yeah.
Because we
know.
were like, everybody plays and it's like, oh, this is sweet, like top, whatever, top 3 seed, and then it's like, man, we're tired.
Yeah.
Because we
And
played so
really,
much.
like, I've said this before, but I think that it's most important to me that the front court gets as much rest as possible, our starting front court,
Yeah.
Jokic and AG in particular. I'd put NPJ in there just because for him to be as fresh as possible for the playoffs and, for his shooting to be like at its height, like it's best when he's coming off of some rest, and I'm fine with that. But I don't really care if our wings and guards necessarily are like rested because for the most part, I kind of expect like a similar level of production from them, and their bodies don't take quite the beating
Mhm.
from their particular roles that Yoke and AG in particular do. For this question, my answer is definitely Christian, and the reason I say that is because if you ask anybody about how the team reacted after losing in Game 7. Almost everyone says that Christian took that loss the hardest of any player, at least in the immediate reaction. And you think about the fact that he hadn't like finished a season without winning a championship since like high school or something, until this Game 7 loss against the Wolves. And the fact that he's probably going to be stepping into a starting role in his third season in the NBA. A lot of people have been talking about how difficult it is going to be to replace KCP and what he brings. And, Will, you and I have talked a lot about what things Christian can bring that would be potential like improvements on the position versus, some of his own limitations that who knows where he's going to, take a leap this summer. But he was also Booth's first draft pick as general manager. He's kind of, when you think about it, the poster boy of Project Dynasty. We're going to see this season what it looks like when one of these young guys gets to, take this starting role. And that's going to play a really important part in how the season goes because not banking on the bench to not be a disaster. You still want those starters minutes to be incredible. And in order to do that, he's going to have to, at least fit into the role within the starting lineup. But I think he's going to have to do at least a little bit more, especially if it's going to be, a viable option for the playoffs for him to be stepping into that KCP role. I talked about this extensively when I was making my case for why the Nuggets should keep KCP, but in the playoffs, he was playing 35 minutes a night. Christian's going to be playing starters minutes for the first time in his career. And, he's been incredibly durable in terms of like games played and all that, but it's a different burden when you are that guy that's taking on the primary defensive matchups every night and for over 30 minutes a night, etc. And now we also only have really like 2.5 shooting guards on this roster. So it's not like he's coming in to back up KCP. Like he's going to be that guy. And I think that while that's a lot of pressure for him, it's also an opportunity. And I think, especially based on the fact that his mom seems very online as well, they're very aware of the narratives. And I think that's going to be like weighing on him, maybe in a good way going into next season.
His role is also like simplified in a way because that bench unit was kind of like, it didn't really have an identity last year. Like in theory it did. And there was a lot of like, I think I mentioned up top, like there was a lot put on his plate early because he's in a unit that's really kind of in a transition year where you're trying to figure out what that looks like versus now it's like, you're coming in the starting lineup. We want you to guard the other team's best player, continue to play alongside Nikola and be active. And the biggest thing probably for him is up your 3-point volume. Like, all right, you're hitting them at 30%. Like we need that to be, and it's not like KCP was taking like 7 threes a game, but I think, I don't know what he was shooting last year, but like we probably want like 4 or 5 threes in a game.
He's probably going to be open more than KCP was too, though, because
he
doesn't have that reputation as a sniper.
For sure.
In part because of like the hesitation on those shots, regardless of the efficiency.
So it might be more, but like at least you look at this and it's not like, all right, we need you to do like 30 things and then also be good at what you're good at already, which is defense and cutting like that. Like it is like a pretty, in terms of like a growth path for a young player, it is pretty streamlined, right? Like you're like, do what you continue to do. We really value that stuff. We really need it in this starting unit. We just want you to, let's just say 3-point shooting. We want you to take more threes like that. I think in a way makes it a little bit easier versus being burdened with a ton of expectations, but also like things you have to do physically on the floor too.
Ideally, you don't want to lose a KCP player and then have to play someone like Christian to replace him. But like in a vacuum, I feel like when you look at a lot of teams that are trying to develop players, I like starting them sooner than later just because you don't want to like situation like Kuminga on the Warriors where it's like, there was like tension between him and the coach in the front office, and then you're like talking about trading him, and all they had to do was just play him.
But a lottery pick, and he has more sort of upside than Christian.
Expectations
so
are
I wouldn't worry about
different.
like the tension part. Yeah,
but you laid it out perfectly, and I had been kind of trying to express that idea too. That the messaging with CB is going to be so much clearer as a starter, despite the role being like technically more difficult and demanding.
Yeah, and he just he makes your entire starting unit different. Like it's just bigger, it rebounds better. Yeah. So there are going to be like questions regarding like, I think spacing is like one of them. Like
the biggest one.
That was, for a team that runs so much through its 2-man game, yes, having AG in the dunker is a huge part of it, but also it was like, we have Mike on one side of the floor and we have KCP in the other corner, or you could run it on a sideline and have those two sharing the floor, right? So it just, that part of it, I think, is the big question mark. Because before it was kind of like you got to pick your poison, right? You're like, all right, are we giving up the corner 3 to KCP, or are we sending 2 to Nikola? Wait, but that means the AG is going to be open for the lob. And now I think it's a little bit more like we're worried about Nikola Jokic. Yeah. We are very aware of the Aaron Gordon lob possibility. Christian Braun is first time starting. That feels like the natural rotation is like, we're going to rotate off that guy and kind of like, and we saw, by the way, we saw teams do that to Peyton last year, the Memphis game, that regular season game in like December-ish, where he hit, I think, I don't know how many threes he hit. He definitely had his career.
It was like 5. It was 5, I think.
It was crazy.
Jaron was I think, roaming off of off of him. That was a fun game. I
There's
love
gonna be.
blowout wins.
I do too. I do too.
They should give us more of those. That's a really good point that you make about the importance of that spacing for the two-man game. And we have this two-man game merchantry on this team, especially when it comes to how reliant they have been on the clutch the last couple of seasons. It's not a crazy number of clutch games when you look at it compared to the other teams, but it's one of those things where you think they've been so dominant here, and part of that is because the teams are either like scared to help off of those corners, or when they do, you could rely on KCP to be one of the people that could punish that choice. And we had Justin Holiday filling in for him a couple of times. I don't know that he's going to be coming back next year, who could also take and make those shots in big moments. And it almost makes me wonder if they're going to have to develop a new identity, not just in the clutch, but throughout the game, because we did see last season, I think part of what made the team feel just like, I wouldn't say stale, but just a little bit more stagnant, is that they became incredibly reliant on the two-man game throughout the course of games. And the offense would not stall out because it was still incredibly efficient, but it wasn't as much movement oriented and things like that. And I wonder if having Christian in the starting lineup, having one less shooter that is respected as KCP is by defenses, is going to force the team to reorient themselves a little bit offensively. So it's also an opportunity to try to, you're talking about Christian just upping his 3-point volume and really not hesitating on those shots. I would also like to see that. But I would also like to see him drive more confidently and finish at the rim a lot better than he did in year 2. But a lot of the things that we're talking about here have to do with his confidence, right? Because we saw when he took those 3-point shots, particularly when it wasn't in the corners, he could make them, but he has to be ready to make that. And when he's not going to do that, he's got to be prepared to pump fake and drive and either make a play or get all the way to the rim. And I think he has the tools to do both of those things, but it's really just about putting it all together, especially mentally, I think.
Yeah, and he's also a good screener, which I like.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. I don't know what that turns into, but in theory, a good screener and somebody who's good above the break gives you more options to run things. Now, I don't know if he's gonna be able to screen, catch, rotate, shoot, but we don't know. I love that point about the offense and diversifying it, because I'm going to trot the Hunter and the hunted line. You ready?
Yeah.
That line was the line of the season last year. It was the hunted. And my impression of that was not so much teams. Yes, they're in theory giving their best shot against you, but you're also you're now the scouting report that every team's looking at. That's really, to me, that's what that means. It's not that teams are oh, we're playing harder and we, had extra Gatorade on the bench. No, it's teams are looking at how you organize your offense, what works well for you, your different counters out of that. And they're saying that's what we have to be. We have to exceed that. And you see that, sure thing, against Minnesota, I think it was second game. What does Rudy Gobert do? He kind of plays in between Nikola and AG
that game one.
And that was my first oh, this is what that means. It's not just teams are playing you hard, but it's you are the team. Everybody has seen how you play. You think about the Warriors for years and years and years. What happens? Well, Houston comes along and they're this super switchy team. They're
oh no, what if we tricked KD into just right. And they're not nearly as efficient as when they play the beautiful game.
For sure. You take teams out of their rhythm, and then it becomes a question of,
can you do something else well enough? Right?
And the answer last year was no, the Nuggets could not. So now, guess what? That change might be built in. You might be building out those counters because you've made a pretty significant structural change to your offense and your starting lineup. So it's interesting. I think there's a lot of different things you can do. It's a big year for Malone. Like it's
Yeah.
I love this. I think it's like for him
And David Adelman, who is
Adelman. Yep.
a Denver Nugget again next year
Yes.
because he did not get a head coaching job, sadly, for other teams, happily for us.
Yes,
in my
I
opinion.
think yeah, for sure. But that's kind of fun. Is like there are going to be the starting unit's the one that I have. Like if we're looking at the projected lineups,
Yeah.
the bench unit I don't have. Like I get what it looks like in theory. The starting unit's the one where I'm like, I don't know how that unit plays on both sides of the ball. I don't know what the defense looks like. Is KCP and Yoke were such a tandem in terms of defending pick and rolls. What does that look like with Christian? Do they have that same chemistry?
Such good
I know.
chemistry.
I don't know.
Such good chemistry.
Yeah, they knew exactly what to expect.
They both had great hands. They're gonna play up. Like they're gonna, they're just like working telepathically defensively. That's such an underrated part of the Nuggets.
Hopefully Jokic can communicate some of that and what he was expecting. When KCP's doing this is what I thought, and this is what I want you to do. And it may just take just a little bit of,
and vice versa. Like I want Christian to also speak up and be that communicator on the floor too, because from everything I've read and heard, like that was a really big part of KCP's role as well. Was just like communicating, not just in when they're trying to defend something 2-on-2 with Jokic, but making sure everyone was getting in position, people getting matched up. That's also on AG as well, and it's really everybody. I know Jokic is become more vocal too, but Christian being like a new addition to the starting lineup. What I don't want is like timidity in that role because we don't have time for that.
yeah, it's go time. It's not the whole roster. It's kind of like that. It is go time. I know there's a long-term window, but you got Nikola Jokic, right? Like you got to try to win it every year. So it'll be fun. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the coaches to devise different game plans, and maybe that benefits the team more long-term because you are more diversified. You are more ready for like to just display, I guess, different schemes and stuff like that. It's like rose tinted, right? So go ahead. But
no, let's be optimistic. Like we enter Cope season, or we're maybe already in it because the Nuggets finally like made a signing. But Will and I are going to be talking about the Cope of the fandom going into next season a lot, for the rest of the summer because there will be dead spots this off season. But anyway, Matt, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sitting down with us to talk through all of these topics for like with the Nuggets and the CBA and everything. It was really cool to know that you like basically have the best job in the world. You just get to like
it's pretty cool.
Create content for the team, and they're just like do some cool stuff.
It's cool.
So before we head out, I wanted to just give a couple of programming notes. On our next episode, Will and I are going to be talking about Summer League. The first Summer League game is this Friday. And we'll probably also be talking about the Team Canada, Team USA friendly that is going on tomorrow. And we're probably going to see Jamal play, I would assume, despite all of this, uncertainty with his contract extension. It seems like he's going to be playing for Team Canada. And next week, also look out for our pre-Olympic buzz episode with Vojislav Medic, who is going to be, talking us through his favorite teams to look out for in the Olympics. Obviously, Serbia is going to be at the top of that list. But yeah, we have a lot of really interesting content coming up this offseason. I was looking at the list again, Will, and I'm like, man, we had so many great ideas. Listeners, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and hit the notification bell. All of the YouTube things, just hit all of the buttons, except the dislike button. Don't hit that one. Leave us a review. We're on Spotify. We're on Amazon Music. We're on Apple Music. Finally, it's awesome. Will did all of the things on the behind the scenes, and now you can listen to us anywhere. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.
It's true.